Good evening and welcome to this Governance and Finance Committee meeting. Before we begin, on behalf of all present and those watching on the webcast, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge that Councillor Mutton has joined us remotely, and we have an apology from Councillor Lamb. Are there any disclosures of interest for any of the items on the agenda? That's no one in the room, and that's a no from you, Councillor Mutton.
No, none from me.
Well, then we'll move to the agenda. The first item is the confirmation of the minutes from the meeting that was held almost exactly a year ago on the 10th of May 2021. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Santa, and a seconder, Councillor Beregi. All those in favour? Those against? Is that an abstention, Councillor Mutton? Oh, you raised your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you. And we'll move to the first item, 4.1, the quarterly budget review. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Beregi. Is there a seconder? Councillor Santa. Is there any discussion or questions? Councillor Beregi.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, could I ask the Director of Finance, Corporate Services, just to comment on a couple of things? I've just got a question. One, the budget amendments in these reports, we're not revising the budget, we're just amending the budget to meet our current financial position. And secondly, in terms of going forward, are we looking to amend the budget further in the next quarter?
Could I suggest that you approach and perhaps sit?
I think it is on actually. Well, there's a green light when hopes it's on. For the new councillors, I'll explain as well something that I've found interesting since I've really been in council, is that within council, I believe it happens in lots of other councils, is the budget is set and then every quarter we're reporting on quarterly results, and we're sort of updating the budget going forward. It's almost like a rolling update. So, and often the updates, the quarterly budget updates are, you know, quite a time in the past. So for instance, we're now discussing March and of course we're already in May. So in terms of the question I'm being asked is, yes, going forward, I will keep, because at the moment this is the system that we're using, there will be every quarter I'll be coming with budget adjustments. So this is the March, and then we'll get the last quarter of June, although there's no statutory requirement to do a June one. In the past, we have done a June one because it's been the wishes of the, I guess, the GM. And then because in June we've got the year-end financial accounts anyway, so it's a little point, and there's so many adjustments. I think that the way in which we do this can be quite confusing, and I'm sure that the new councillors found that, probably wondering why we were talking about October and December, and you know how it follows through all those different quarters and reiterates that. I think, and we're definitely not the budget is the original budget, and we're comparing the figures each quarter to the original budget, but it can feel like, which it is, a revision of the budget and a revision of the budget. So we're not actually, we're comparing March quarter to the previous quarter. However, we do mention the original budget. So it can cause a situation where we're focusing on the revised budget and the variations in the revised budget rather than focusing on the original budget and where are we as it stands today. And so that is quite confusing, the way in which we do it. We have been doing this for some time, and it means that if you like, the measurement against the original budget and where we are now can become quite unclear, or it could be clearer. Whereas, you know, and as we all know, I came from, or you may not know, I came from outside of council. So often it will be the original budget, where we are now, they're the variations, and that's the analysis. So it's just that we've introduced, and the councils have introduced, many measurements within it. So I guess the answer to that is that there will be more quarterly budget reviews, and there will, unless I get a directive to tell me any different, because that's the way that we've been rolling forward. I think from the new council's perspective, this paper has provided a bit of history, but that history is always provided, and we're always looking back, rather than measuring as we are, where we are actually now. So we're discussing March, whereas, as we all know, and I know some of the councillors that got strong financial backgrounds will be used to discussing, well, what happened last month, not what happened back in May. So that, I have found that interesting since I've joined the council, but that is how we're, you know, dealing with it.
Councillor Berge, you had a second question. Do you want to repeat that, or is it covered by that answer? Are there any other questions or discussion? I just note and welcome Councillor Drummond has joined us remotely, and Councillor Gibson in person. Did you have a question, Councillor Drummond? No. Thank you. In that case, I put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. I just note and welcome that as we finish that vote, Councillor Spenceley joined us. Welcome. He's attending remotely. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is 4.2, the Q3 review of the operational plan. That's at page 14 of 46 of your papers. Is there a mover for the recommendation or some other motion? Councillor Berge, is there a seconder? Councillor Burke, are there any questions or discussion? Anyone attending remotely? Councillor Spenceley, Drummond or Mutton, do you have a question or discussion? No. Okay, on that basis, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's unanimous. It takes us to item 4.3, councillor superannuation. That's at page 17 of 46. Again, is there a mover of the recommendation or some other motion? Councillor Welsh, Councillor Gibson seconded. Is there any discussion or questions on this item? Councillor Gibson?
I'll just say this is about time. I could never understand how councillors were left out of the superannuation scheme. It just seemed quite bizarre that you would put in years and years of community work, and unlike every other worker in this country, you were never entitled to super. And I've raised this at every local government conference since I've been elected. It was just outright unfair. And certainly we need to do everything we can do to encourage people to put their hands up for local government. And this sort of unfair treatment goes against that, goes against encouraging a wide range of people to join local government. So it's about time.
Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Sandra.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to endorse that and add that I've been following a council website of other councils. They're certainly moving to adopt it, and quite a number have, and we would be joining a trend.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Those attending remotely? No. Thank you. I put the motion. All those in favour? That's That's unanimous.
Really in favour. William's really in favour.
Thank you, that's unanimous. That will take us to item 4.4, the Emergency Services Levy Council contributions. That's for those on the numbered pages, page 21 and 46. Is there a mover for the recommendation or another motion? Councillor Berrigie moves. Is there a seconder? Councillor Burke. Is there any questions or discussions other than the comment I'll make, which is once again one of the most grossest examples of cost shifting from the state government to local? Is there any other comments or questions? We'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That takes us to item 4.5. Outdoor dining licences waiving fees during COVID. That's on page 24 of 46. Is there a mover for the recommendation?
I'll move that.
Councillor Gibson, is there a seconder? Councillor Spenceley. Are there any questions or comments?
I would just like to say I think it was an excellent initiative from this council, and we have many small businesses that probably wouldn't have been able to keep their doors open if we hadn't acted quickly and strongly to protect them. And I think it's been much appreciated. And I think we'll have more. I think we'll have some extra applications to extend outdoor seating, outdoor dining licences coming up fairly soon, because it's been a huge success. And as we always say, we want to liven up our streetscapes and make our streets a place for people. And there's no better way to do that than to have people dining outside, because it just instantly livens up a space and makes our streets safer to walk down as well.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Are there any other questions or comments? No, I put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That takes us to item 4.6, Corporate Policy Framework. That's at page 29 of 46 of the papers. Is there a motion? Councillor Berrigie moved the recommendation, and a seconder. Councillor Santa. Is there any discussion? No. In the absence of that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. 4.7, Code of Conduct for Councillors and Staff. That's at page 33 of 46. Is there a recommendation, a mover of the recommendation or another motion? Councillor Welsh and Councillor Spenceley, if you seconded that. Is that a yes? Is there any discussion?
Is 28 days enough time for it to go out, given that it does go to precincts which need to read it, and if they want to make a submission, 28 days, it's less than a month and is a bit tight?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's a minimum of 28 days, so we could certainly put it on exhibition for longer to ensure engagement with the precincts, but that's the statutory requirement, is the 28 days.
Could I ask the movers and seconders, otherwise I'm happy to move it as an amendment, that we extend the exhibition period?
For any period? 42?
Well, kind of 42, which allows just over a month. Is that all right? I can't remember who seconded.
It was Councillor Spenceley. He's nodding agreement.
Support that?
I'm happy with that.
Can I just make a quick comment? I totally agree with lengthening the exhibition period, but it shouldn't be just for precincts. It should be for everyone to have time for extra input. All our stakeholders are equal when it comes to the consultation process. So this is fairer for everyone.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? No, we'll put the motion, and that's amended to 42 days rather than 28 days exhibition. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That takes us to item 4.8, councillor and staff interaction policy. Is there a mover? Councillor Berrigie.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move the recommendation with an amendment. Sorry.
Or addition.
Addition to the, sorry, yes, an addition. Just pulling up in terms of the contacts. I'm a bit concerned that councillors aren't able to contact managers who really directly run a very sizable part of the functioning of body, and also someone that councillors contact, for example, the manager of planning services, the manager of, sorry, the titles slip me because I know their names. Marcelo's the manager of
Strategic
planning. Mr. Beattie, manager of development services. For instance, the manager of community services. So could we add those into the recommendation? And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find where the table is.
It's schedule 1 to the draft policy.
Yes, thank you. Where is it? So that we're authorised to contact the manager, strategic planning, the manager, development assessments.
Could we say all managers?
Well, I guess that's...
What about the manager of communication?
Could I suggest from the chair that you may not need to do this? I discussed this with the acting general manager before the meeting because I shared the same concern. Because waste services, parks, and there is a discretion for the general manager to extend the list in the schedule.
Okay.
So I assume that with consultation with the council, and it's pretty clear around the table that there's certainly value in being able to talk directly to the manager of development assessment on many an occasion, that could be accommodated within the report that's already here.
So in terms of the recommendation, Mayor, would we need to adjust the recommendation to reflect that?
The words are in the schedule, beginning of the schedule 1.
And does that include the manager of communications, Mayor?
The manager of communications has been included in the schedule already from recollection. It's in the report.
I think all the managers should be included. They're the ones, sometimes if you can't get hold of a director and you want an answer quickly, we should be able to contact
traditionally,
the
we
manager.
have always been able to contact managers. Yeah. I think, though, that it's a level of manager that may not be, so it might be a senior manager level. We could, perhaps what we could do is request a practical way, an amended schedule to come to with the minutes to this meeting, to the council meeting for adoption.
Happy to move that way. So if we can adopt the recommendation with an amended schedule
to incorporate
managers, appropriate managers, and that comes back to the council meeting when the governance minutes are.
That's moved by Councillor Berrigie and seconded by Councillor Gibson. Is there a Councillor Burke?
So, Mayor, through you to the Acting General Manager. So in a practical sense, my understanding, we've been asked to contact governance, go through governance for any contact with any staff. Firstly, is that correct, that that's the way to contact all staff? And then secondly, what would be the practical implications of this change?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just firstly in relation to the authorised staff contacts, that's a list that is determined by the General Manager, and the reason for that is because staff report to the General Manager and the General Manager is the only person who can direct staff, but we can certainly look at the people included on that list. In the first instance, councillors are encouraged to put their inquiries through to governance. That's so that councillors don't need to know the specific staff member that they might need to direct things to, and also so that the request can be monitored to ensure it's being responded to in a timely manner. However, this Schedule 1 does set out the authorised staff contacts, and those are people that councillors may contact, generally by phone if they have an inquiry.
And if I may, from the chair, Councillor Gibson and Councillor Berrigie can back me up the whole time I've been on the council, councillors have had a staff contact list provided by the general manager that extended to directors and the senior managers. And I'm sure you've had a recent example with a development application inquiry where the quickest and simplest answer to the question is by contacting by phone the manager of development assessment who'd be able to assist you. So it allows a greater responsive time frames and yeah. So I'd encourage you to support the motion. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, so put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That takes us to 4.9, Councillor Induction and Professional Development Policy. That's at page 38 of 46. Is there a mover for the recommendation or another motion? Moved by Councillor Berrigy. Is there a seconder? Councillor Santa. Any discussion or questions?
No discussion. I'd just like to say thank you for arranging the councillor induction program there. It's a big thing when you have half the council new, and it's appreciated the amount of effort that goes into it.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That takes us there's a confidential matter relating to the North Sydney Olympic Pool redevelopment. I have an understanding that there's a desire to defer this matter because it's quite complicated and it might do with another briefing. Councillor Berrigy.
Madam Mayor, I have a motion to defer this to a councillor briefing. This is quite a detailed report, which is going to require quite a bit of discussion and reading. So I'd like to move that we defer to a councillor briefing, a confidential councillor briefing.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Could I ask what the implications of deferring this are? Are there any financial implications?
There's none. It's just reception of the report. It's a recommendation. Is there a seconder for Councillor Berrigy's motion to defer? Councillor Welsh. Is there any other discussion? And just remind you, Councillor Gibson, this committee is not a decision-making body, so there are really no consequences. Although I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Delays often have consequences.
That's unanimous. And that takes us to the end of the meeting. Thank you, councillors. I close the meeting. Oh, sorry, Councillor Burke.
So there has been some discussion around, my understanding is incorporating this committee into the monthly council meetings. Is that correct, Mayor?
I think that discussion is, unless there are no real items of general business, but if you have a matter of urgency around that, I understand that there's a report coming to the next council meeting on the fortnightly cycle, and that we'll be able to discuss these sorts of meetings in that fortnightly cycle.
Can I have it confirmed that this meeting, this committee is being considered for incorporation into the monthly council meeting?
There was a resolution of council that we consult in relation to the conduct of 2 council meetings per month and the abolition of the committees. And so that consultation's occurred, and there is a briefing planned for Monday, and then a report to council.
Thank you. And again, thank you for your attendance and participation. The meeting is closed.